The area we now know as Magic Valley was once described as a land where no man permanently resides, a vast uninhabited solitude with precipitous cliffs and yawning ravines, looking like the ruins of a world, vast desert tracts that must ever defy cultivation, and interpose dreary and thirsty wilds between the habitations of man. So wrote Washington Irving in 1837. Through a system of dams and irrigation canals, early settlers to this valley magically transformed the arid soil into productive farmland. Similarly, as the land was being prepared, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints began sowing the seeds of the gospel of Jesus Christ throughout the area. Although this marvelous effort was not always welcomed, it is clear that the Lord found good ground in the Magic Valley. As we celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Twin Falls Idaho Stake, we hope you enjoy this brief history of its creation and evolution. Further, we hope you feel encouraged to add your effort and testimony to its continued growth. As President Allan H. Oakes has said, quote, "We have the seed of the gospel word. It is up to each of us to set the priorities and to do the things that make our soil good and our harvest plentiful. We must seek to be firmly rooted and converted to the gospel of Jesus Christ." End of quote. The first settlers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in south-central Idaho left their homes in Tooele County, Utah in 1879 and began settling in the Goose Creek Valley in the present-day Cassia County. The townsite of Oakley became the region's first settlement, and on May 9, 1880, a branch was organized with 14 initial members. Rapid growth in the area led to the establishment of the Cassia Ward in 1882, the first ward organized in south-central Idaho. Horton D. Haight was sent to preside over this ward as bishop by President John Taylor. At the time, its membership consisted of 80 families of Latter-day Saints that had moved to the Oakley Basin area. Only 5 short years later, Bishop Haight was called as the first stake president of the newly formed Cassia Stake in 1887. Little did President Haight know that the fledgling Cassia Stake would go on to spawn multiple other stakes in the region, nor that one of his own grandsons, David B. Haight, would one day receive a call to be an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In 1902, the Saints in the Oakley area constructed the Cassia Stake Tabernacle using native stone. With a seating capacity of 700, it was completed at a cost of $12,000. From here, the future rapid growth of the church in south-central Idaho would be directed. Over the next decade, the construction of the U.S. Reclamation Service's Minidoka Dam and other irrigation and railroad projects further west along the Snake River would bring about explosive population growth to south-central Idaho and would attract many members of the church to settle in the area. In 1904, the Twin Falls City was founded as a planned community. Once the Milner Dam and its associated series of irrigation canals were completed in 1905, larger-scale farming became possible in the area. Twin Falls City was incorporated as a village on April 12, 1905, and settlers rushed in to try their hand at farming, and supporting businesses sprang up rapidly. Within 2 months of the incorporation of Twin Falls, the Kimberly branch, the first branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this part of Idaho, was organized by the Cassia Stake Presidency on May 28, 1905, in the home of Albert F. McEwen, where the Saints met until construction of the first schoolhouse in Kimberly, the Woodrow School, was completed. Interestingly, the members of the Kimberly branch shared the Woodrow School as a house of worship with the congregations of every religious organization in the Kimberly area at that time. In the spring of 1908, the fledgling Kimberly branch constructed their own wooden church building at a cost of $900. Finally, the Saints had a dedicated space in which to worship. 2 years later, in December of 1907, a separate Twin Falls Sunday School was organized in the home of Peter Swenson, the first presiding elder in Twin Falls. 1 year later, on August 23, 1908, the Kimberly branch was divided, with the western half of the old boundaries forming the new Twin Falls branch. Despite early opposition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints continued to grow. 100 years after the formation of the branch, during the 2008 Twin Falls Temple dedication, Peter Swenson's granddaughter, Ruby Phillips Nicole, wrote about the challenges those early saints faced as they struggled to establish the church in Twin Falls.
I am sure that those who had passed beyond the veil were remembering when they came to the valley of Twin Falls in 1907 and were met with the sign, "No Negroes nor Mormons welcome here."
Other early saints experienced similar resistance to the establishment of the church in Twin Falls and felt that early settlers of south central Idaho feared the influence of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in secular life. Sister Helene Crockett, a lifetime member of our stake, shared a few of the reasons she believes were to blame for such resistance.
When the church-sponsored colonization took place in the Cassius Stake area in the late 1800s, the ranchers were already well established all around the South Hills. The Mormons brought sheep herds with them, and hard feelings developed over available grazing areas. The farmers that came to settle Magic Valley mostly came from Kansas, Missouri, and other states of the Midwest. These people were, for the most part, religious families of good American stock. Unfortunately, they brought with them an antagonism and dislike for the Latter-day Saints. This, mixed with the feelings already developed by the cattlemen and others, created a chasm that lasted a very long time.
She went on to describe a few examples of how openly that opposition was expressed.
An early celebration after the water was turned into the canals, and with the arrival of the first train in 1905, a parade was held in Twin Falls, and on one of the big floats was a large banner that read, "Everyone welcome except Mormons and Chinese."
Sister Crockett also mentioned that open discrimination against members of the church was practiced when making hiring decisions in the community.
The early members of the church in Twin Falls were not permitted to be elected to the school board, nor elected to any city office. No Mormon school teachers were permitted to teach in the schools. A lady by the name of Olivette Webb was the first LDS school teacher. She was hired by accident when they needed someone in a hurry and forgot to inquire of her religion.
Despite early opposition, early church members in Twin Falls refused to be discouraged, worked hard to live their religion, and gradually earned the trust of their neighbors in this new community. Again, Ruby Phillips Nicole wrote,
The saints were undaunted and moved on with faith and determination to establish homes for their families and their church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so they could worship according to their beliefs.
Quickly outgrowing the various homes where the early members of the Twin Falls branch held their meetings of worship, the branch purchased the old Twin Falls School building on the corner of 3rd, now Idaho Street, and 3rd Avenue East in downtown Twin Falls on February of 1909. That building had previously functioned as the meeting house for the congregations of both the Presbyterian and United Methodist churches. It was there that they met when they became a ward on June 19, 1910, with Lawrence G. Kirkman as bishop. The new Twin Falls ward quickly outgrew the school building and in 1916 began meeting in the church building at 5th Avenue East and 3rd Street East, previously owned by the First Baptist Church. This building currently houses the Rock Creek Community Church at 252 5th Avenue East. Around the same time, work was undertaken by the Twin Falls ward to help the church grow in the outlying areas. In 1914, two missionaries, Arthur Jarman and Theodore Cheney, were sent to organize two separate Sunday schools in the Buell area. One Sunday school met in the home of Chris Rosencrantz, 4 miles south of Buell. The other Sunday school met in an old store building and dance hall 4 miles west and 1 mile south of Buell. A few families met at each of these places, although early members report that the weather and road conditions often changed where families might attend on any particular Sunday. The two Sunday schools were consolidated to form the Buell branch on January 1st, 1915, with Horatio Cox being called and set apart as the first presiding elder by President William Jack. A Buell Ward chapel was built in 1917-1918, located on the corner of Locust and 13th Avenue, across the street from the present Lincoln Courts. In 1919, 9 years after the organization of the Twin Falls Ward, enough growth had taken place within the church in the Magic Valley that discussions were held about the possibility of forming a stake in this area. On Saturday, July 26, 1919, an afternoon remembered by church members to be especially hot and dry, a special Cassius Stake conference was held in the Lavering Opera House on 2nd Avenue East in Twin Falls, the modern-day site of Blacker's Furniture. Presiding at the meeting was Elder Rudger Clausen, acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, accompanied by Elder Melvin J. Ballard, the newest ordained apostle. During this conference, the prayers of the saints in Twin Falls were answered as it was announced that the Cassius Stake would be divided into 3 separate stakes: the Twin Falls Stake, the Burley Stake, and the Cassius Stake. The new Twin Falls Stake was the 76th stake organized in the church since the arrival of the saints in the Salt Lake Valley, and covered areas of south central Idaho from Murtaugh to Buell. Lawrence G. Kirkman was set apart as president, Edward M. Guest as first counselor, and Raymond McClellan as second counselor. At the time, the membership of the Twin Falls Stake was 1,400, with 169 Melchizedek priesthood holders. The Twin Falls Stake had the distinction of being the first stake organized during the 1918 and 1919, since all new stake organizations had been held up by the combination of World War I, the great influenza pandemic of 1918, and the death of President Joseph F. Smith. The overjoyed members of the newly formed Twin Falls Stake celebrated by gathering together and taking a group photo in front of the Twin Falls County Courthouse. The members of the Twin Falls Ward then took a photo of their own. In 1920, the Twin Falls Ward was still meeting in the former First Baptist Church on 5th Avenue East, not far from the Twin Falls Public Library. Sister Velma Cox, now 104 years old and a lifelong member of the Twin Falls Stake, remembers attending church in that building. She remembers steep stairs leading into a large basement area where they would hang calico fabric sheets or curtains to serve as room dividers. She hated times when her brothers would make her late for Sunday school because she knew that they would have to make their way through all the hanging curtains, lifting them up and ducking under them as they tried to find their particular class.
It is interesting to note that in those days the sacrament bread was passed in a regular plate by the deacon, and a glass of water was passed on a tray down the row. One mother cautioned her children to drink on the other side of the handle to avoid the germs. One particular year, the flu was so bad that a smaller glass of water was used and was dipped into a disinfectant solution after each person partook.
During fast and testimony meeting, it became a trend for ward members to confess their sins. This was soon discouraged, as it was setting a wrong example for the young people. Sometimes sacrament meeting talks were assigned, but most of the time brethren were called up out of the audience to speak. The meeting lasted at least 2 hours.
Due to ongoing growth, the Twin Falls Ward was divided into the Twin Falls First and Twin Falls Second Wards on February 7, 1921, only to be temporarily consolidated again into a single ward on August 1, 1926. In those days, stake conferences and other important stake gatherings were held in the new Orpheum Theater on Main Avenue in downtown Twin Falls. One such special meeting took place in August of 1925. The Twin Falls Daily Times reported the following.
On Saturday, August 8, 1925, President Kirkman of the Twin Falls Stake announced that President Heber J. Grant would speak here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and again at 2 p.m. in the Orpheum Theater. This will be President Grant's first official visit to the Twin Falls Stake, and he will undoubtedly have a large bearing. The public is invited, according to President Kirkman, and no admission or collection will be taken. Special music will be furnished by the choirs from the two wards, and Mr. and Mrs. Payne of Rupert will be present and render special music. Twin Falls Daily Times, Saturday, 8th August, 1925.
Sister Velma Cox attended the special meeting and recalls that she was so excited to be able to sit upstairs in the balcony seats with her sister. After the conference, she was able to meet President Grant and speak with him for a few minutes. She remembered him as being a very kind and patient man, though it would take until the 1930s before the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would have a completed stake tabernacle of their own in the center of town. One longtime member of the church wrote the following.
Twin Falls was a rare exception in the development of frontier towns in that there was both a school in operation and churches organized before the first saloon in town. The founding fathers of Twin Falls felt that religion was important and laid out lots all around the city park for churches to be built.
In fulfillment of the vision of those early planners, many large and beautiful church buildings were built around the perimeter of the city park throughout the first 20 years after the founding of Twin Falls. The leaders of the Twin Falls Ward desired to have a place of worship of their own that would face the park. A large lot on the corner of 4th Avenue and 2nd Street East, now 4th Avenue East and Hanson Street, the current site of the parking lot of White Mortuary, was secured anticipating the construction of a beautiful Latter-day Saint tabernacle. Initial groundwork on the site was begun in 1918. However, challenges arose immediately. Checked by post-war high prices, Church officials queried President Heber J. Grant and his advice how to stop further construction until member finances improved and the bills could be paid. Construction of the original Twin Falls Ward and Stake building, also known as the Tabernacle, was finally started about 1920. For 5 years after that, the building consisted of only the foundation, which was constructed partially through donation work. It wasn't until October 23, 1927, that the cornerstone of the Twin Falls Stake and Ward Tabernacle was laid. The following year, in 1928, church members began to use the recreation room in the basement, which was said to have a beautiful maple hardwood floor. Early members recall that dances were frequently held there. As the finances of the members slowly improved, construction of the tabernacle itself was begun. Work on the outside of the building was contracted, but much of the work on the interior of the tabernacle was performed by church members as a donation. After several years of sacrifice, the construction was completed. The Twin Falls Stake Tabernacle was considered at the time to be a truly modern house of worship. Erected at a cost of $90,000, it contained an auditorium with seating for 800 people, an amusement hall with a stage, 14 classrooms, a baptismal font, a stake office, a prayer circle room, a bishop's office, a Relief Society hall, and a kitchen. Sources seem to indicate that it was dedicated twice, first upon the completion of the construction in 1930, and then again by President Heber J. Grant in 1935, in keeping with a church policy to rededicate church buildings once all debt related to its construction had been paid off. Little information could be found about the 1930 dedication. However, at that time, the Twin Falls Stake was reported to have 2,575 members, 643 of them being children. At that time, the still recombined Twin Falls Ward had 1,530 members, including 364 children, which would have been about 17% of Twin Falls' 8,787 residents. Imagine how large that ward would have been by today's standards. After all debts related to its construction had been completely repaid, President Heber J. Grant returned to Twin Falls on Sunday, July 28, 1935, to formally dedicate the Twin Falls Idaho Tabernacle. The Twin Falls Daily News reported the following.
President Heber J. Grant, President of the Latter-day Saints Church, Salt Lake City, here to dedicate the Twin Falls Stake's $90,000 tabernacle this afternoon, gave an eloquent and forceful address before an audience of 500 at the opening session of the quarterly conference last evening at the tabernacle. We are the architects, the designers of our lives. We are also the builders. We can tell people how to build and mold their lives, but they must do the building themselves, he stated. Introduced by Stake President J.W. Richens, President Grant discussed the spirit of love and service as exemplified in everyday living, and of the rewards and punishments that naturally follow. He enriched his address with many colorful personal experiences.
The Stake Tabernacle took its rightful place around the Twin Falls City Park and became the center of activity for members of the church in the 1930s. Despite ongoing opposition to the growth of the church by some in the community, this new location offered more interaction between Latter-day Saints and the members of other faiths, just as the founders of this town had hoped would occur. Sister Valine Crockett recalled the following.
On Sunday afternoon after church services, the Catholics, Methodists, Presbyterians, Baptists, and Latter-day Saints would spill out into the park with its growing trees and dappled sunshine for an afternoon of community. I recall once being taught the maypole dance in preparation for a celebration on a Sunday afternoon in City Park.
Many current stake members might be surprised to learn that President Allan H. Oakes, first counselor in the First Presidency, spent 6 of the first 8 years of his life as a member of the Twin Falls Stake in the 1930s. His parents, Lloyd and Stella, were pioneering and influential early members of the Twin Falls Stake. Lloyd E. Oakes and Stella Harris met as students at Brigham Young University in the mid-1920s. Upon graduation, Lloyd moved to Philadelphia to attend medical school, but the couple stayed close and continued courting from a distance. During that time, Stella attained a bachelor's degree in 1927 and began teaching. With this income, she not only paid back her school debts, but also enabled her younger sisters to go to college. Finally, after 3 years of long-distance courtship, Stella and Lloyd married in 1929. Stella joined Lloyd in Philadelphia, where he finished his final year of medical school and a 1-year internship. After completing his medical training, the couple moved back to Provo, Utah, where he began to practice medicine. On August 12, 1932, the Oaks welcomed the arrival of their first child, Allan H. Oakes. Unhappy in his first 2 years of medical practice in Provo, Lloyd and Stella prayerfully sought the Lord's guidance. Stella later recalled the words of a priesthood blessing her husband received, wherein he was promised that he would move into an area where the Lord had some of his choicest people. Soon thereafter, in late 1932, Stella and Lloyd Oakes felt prompted to move to the relatively new town of Twin Falls, Idaho. President Allan H. Oakes recently shared an account of his parents' move that illustrates the faith of the early church members in Twin Falls. When Dr. Lloyd Oakes was meeting with bank officials in Twin Falls to secure a loan to start up his practice, they advised him in all soberness that in order to be successful as a physician in this town, he would be wise to hide his membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Dr. Oakes did just the opposite, publicly embracing his identity as an active church member, and willingly served in various capacities in the Twin Falls Ward and Stake, including service as a member of the Twin Falls Stake High Council. His faith was rewarded, and soon he had a thriving medical practice in Twin Falls. Stella's life revolved around her family and service in the church. Shortly before moving to Twin Falls, she received a letter notifying her that she was to be called as the Twin Falls Stake Drama Director. She hit the ground running and soon was organizing theatrical and other community events designed to bless the lives of Latter-day Saints and to improve relationships with those of other faiths. Thinking back on those times, Sister Oakes said,
"I have a whole book of photographs of the activities at that time, and I have never seen it equaled anywhere that I have lived. The things that were done in those years in Twin Falls under adverse circumstances of public opinion, and the fact that we were so few in number. Oh, how good it is to participate in the work of the Lord, and to see it grow mighty. And then it is a part of us."
Stella and Lloyd felt richly blessed during their time in Twin Falls. The Oakes family happily grew larger with the births of Merrill C. Oakes on January 12, 1936, and Evelyn Oakes on March 12, 1939. In 1971, Stella recalled,
"Those were the 8 happiest years of my life, the years of my children being born in Twin Falls, and the years when my husband practiced medicine in Twin Falls."
Unfortunately, tragedy struck the Oakes family. Dr. Lloyd Oakes contracted tuberculosis from one of his patients, and on June 10, 1940, at the age of 37, and only 10 years since completing his medical degree, he passed away. At the time of his passing, Brother Oakes was serving on the Stake High Council. This photograph of the Twin Falls Idaho Stake High Council was taken with an empty chair to honor their former council member. This tragic loss left Stella a widow with 3 young children, Allan, 7, Merrill, age 4, and Evelyn, 1. She was forced to move the family back to her parents' home in Payson, Utah. In his autobiography, President Oakes shared that in the wake of his father's passing, his mother was left struggling with a question that has troubled many faithful Latter-day Saints. When he died, she and others struggled to reconcile his death with their faith and the numerous priesthood-declared promises of healing, President Oakes wrote. However, President Oakes' family found comfort in the words of President J.W. Richens of the Twin Falls Stake, who spoke at the funeral about the Savior submitting his will to the will of his Father. "His prayer was not answered because it was not the will of the Lord," Richens said. "And so our prayers have not been answered as we have asked for Lloyd's recovery, but we have always said, 'Thy will be done.'" Though she struggled greatly as she mourned the loss of her husband and learned how to raise 3 children as a single mother, Stella went on to excel in several teaching and administrative positions and eventually attended Columbia University in New York City, where she completed her master's degree in guidance and personal administration. The Stella H. Oakes Foundation has recently been established in her honor with the purpose of providing educational scholarships to single mothers with minor children at home. One of Sister Oakes' favorite quotes was, "If a thing can be done, then hard work and intelligence can do it. But if a thing cannot be done, then only faith can do it." "I am blessed with an extraordinary mother," President Oakes recalls. "She surely was one of the many noble women who have lived in the latter days." Sister Valine Crockett recalled that after World War II, the church began to grow faster, both in numbers and in stature. Fine young men moved into Twin Falls with their families to be representative of many businesses in the southern part of the state. They not only added to the growing church and their talents and training, but influenced non-members and helped build the church image as they traveled the valley and met with customers. Many projects, events, and just happenings were created and tried in order to provide a better understanding of the gospel and to strengthen the image of the church. Such efforts served to build a better relationship in the area and to stimulate more interest in our religion. One such project was a 15-minute radio program every Tuesday evening for 13 weeks in the early 1940s, where Twin Falls Stake member Carl Freeman would give a mini-sermon. The subsequent decades saw the membership of the Twin Falls Stake grow more rapidly, resulting in the creation of additional wards and the construction of new church buildings. As the number of families in the stake grew, it became apparent that the Stake Tabernacle facing City Park could no longer adequately provide for the needs of the stake's rapidly expanding membership. Ground for a new stake center was broken in 1954, and after 3 years of construction, the newly completed Twin Falls Stake Center, located at 425 Maurice Street, was dedicated on February 17, 1957. It initially housed the newly formed 5th and 6th wards, and also became the new headquarters for the stake. Many modern features of this much larger stake center were a blessing to the members of the rapidly growing stake. Its main chapel was able to seat 350 people, while its adjoining recreation hall could expand the seating to include an additional 1,500 people for large gatherings. A glass-enclosed mother's lounge overlooking the chapel contained several cribs for young infants, and made it possible to see and hear all the services in the main chapel. A modern and integrated sound system had been installed throughout the building, along with a pipe organ and a grand piano of the finest quality. In addition to a basement baptistry and large scout room, there were also a well-decorated Relief Society room, a large kitchenette, a seminary room, stake and ward offices, and 24 separate classrooms. Upstairs, a junior chapel was built with the capacity to seat 200 primary children and the ability to be divided into 4 sections by sliding partitions. Additionally, there was sufficient parking for 160 cars, something the old Stake Tabernacle facing the park could never accommodate. The total cost of this grand edifice and furnishings was $321,191, all of which had been paid at the time of the dedication, thanks to the sacrifice of many faithful saints of the stake. On March 19, 1961, the Twin Falls 8th Ward was organized as the 12th unit of the Twin Falls Stake. At that time, the Twin Falls Stake consisted of the Twin Falls 1st through 8th Wards, Kimberly Ward, Murtaugh Ward, Buell Ward, and the Hollister Branch. On July 19, 1969, the Twin Falls Stake celebrated its growth and 50-year history with an anniversary celebration held at the Stake Center on Maurice Street. Less than a month later, the fruits of that growth were realized as the stake was divided for the first time. As a result, on August 16, 1969, the Twin Falls West Stake was organized as the 490th Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with Joel A. Tate, a former president of the Twin Falls Stake, being called as its first stake president. Their new stake center would come to be located at 667 Harrison Street, Twin Falls, and initially housed the 6th and 8th wards. The original Twin Falls West stake boundaries covered the western portion of Twin Falls, as well as Filer, Buell, and Hollister. After so much sacrifice and expense in completing the stately tabernacle facing the city park, it comes as a surprise to many that only 40 years after its dedication, the Twin Falls Stake Tabernacle was sold by the church in early 1975 to the owners of White Mortuary to make room for a parking lot. Less than 2 months after the sale, the demolition began on April 9, 1975, reducing the stately, pillared building to a pile of rubble. Apparently, the building lacked an adequate heating and cooling system, and other amenities of more modern construction, was seen to have some falling plaster, and also had evidence of a termite infestation. All that remains now are a few photographs and written memories documented in the journals of a few faithful members of the original Twin Falls Stake. On April 15, 1979, just under 10 years since its first division, the Twin Falls Stake was again divided to form the Kimberly Stake, taking with it Twin Falls 11th Ward. President David L. Carter, who had been serving as the Twin Falls Stake president since 1975, became the first president of the new Kimberly Stake. President Edwin O. Cook took his place as president of the Twin Falls Stake. The growth of the church in the area had finally come full circle. The site of the first branch in south-central Idaho that predated even the organization of the first Sunday school in Twin Falls had now become its own stake. Construction commenced on the new Kimberly Stake building at 3850 North, 3500 East in Kimberly, and the dedication took place on April 25, 1982. The Twin Falls 13th Ward was created on July 13, 1980, with Larry F. Waymont as the first bishop. Growth continued through the 1980s in all the surrounding stakes. 2 years after the Twin Falls Stake divided for a second time to form the Kimberly Stake, the Twin Falls West Stake divided for its first time to form the Filer Stake on June 15, 1981, the fourth stake within the original boundaries of the Twin Falls Stake. The Southern Idaho College branch was created on July 31, 1988, with Randy V. Hansen as the first branch president. The branch became the College of Southern Idaho Student Ward on January 18, 1994, and in coming years went through a series of further name changes and divisions. After spawning 3 separate college wards and a separate single young adult ward known as the Blue Lakes Ward, realignments would eventually lead to the existence of what are now known as the Twin Falls YSA 1st and YSA 2nd wards. Ongoing growth on the northeast side of Twin Falls led to the formation of the Twin Falls 15th Ward on September 25, 1994, with Don Stevenson being called as the first bishop. This ward was created by taking in parts of both the Twin Falls 11th Ward and the Kimberly 1st Ward, at that time within the Kimberly Stake. Within the Twin Falls boundaries at the time, the Twin Falls 17th Ward was created on February 20, 2000. It would remain with the Twin Falls Stake for 8 years before being moved due to stake realignments. In June 2004, President Hinckley met with Brent H. Nielsen, president of the Twin Falls Idaho West Stake and great-grandson of Horton D. Haight, to choose a site for the yet unannounced Twin Falls Idaho Temple. Of the 8 sites under consideration, President Hinckley chose the Candleridge Golf Course, a 36-acre parcel near the rim of the Snake River Canyon.
We are also pleased to announce that we will construct another temple in Idaho, where we have the 3rd largest membership in the United States. Plans are going forward for one in Rexburg. Now we're also planning to build another in the city of Twin Falls. This temple will serve thousands of our members who live between Idaho Falls and Boise.
The Twin Falls 22nd branch, Rama 22, was created for Spanish-speaking members in the Twin Falls Idaho West Stake on October 11, 2005. The branch was transferred to the Twin Falls Idaho South Stake in September of 2008 and was expanded to serve members living within the boundaries of the Twin Falls West, Twin Falls South, and Kimberly Stakes. On the 5th of February, 2006, Randy V. Hansen was called to preside over the Twin Falls Idaho Stake with counselors Reed J. Harris and Kelly C. Ward. They were soon to help shepherd in the coming of the Twin Falls Temple and to oversee the creation of yet another stake within the original boundaries of the Twin Falls Stake. Ground was broken for the Twin Falls Idaho Temple April 15, 2006, the day before Easter Sunday. Presiding at the ceremony was Elder Neil L. Anderson of the Presidency of the 70, who himself was reared in southeast Idaho. He honored the late apostle, Elder David B. Haight, a native of Oakley, and shared the story of Elder Haight's parents' trip by buggy to wed in the Logan, Utah temple. Our children and our children's children will not travel to the Twin Falls Temple by buggy, said Elder Anderson, but they too will remember their days in the Twin Falls Temple. This work that we commence today is a holy work. It will bless the city. We honor our neighbors, our kind neighbors, who have allowed us to worship as we believe. In the summer of 2008, during the 5 weeks preceding the dedication, the temple was opened to the public for tours of the interior. Tours commenced in the adjoining meeting house, where visitors were shown an introductory video and then guided through the temple. Local stakes eagerly provided the 650 volunteers needed each day to conduct tours with responsibilities that included serving refreshments, directing traffic, and putting booties on the feet of all who entered the temple. The open house generated tremendous interest among friends of other faiths, who represented approximately 40% of the total visitors. Though 136,000 tickets had been reserved for tours, an additional 23,000 toured the building, for a total of 159,863 visitors, 10,000 more than had been planned for. The Saturday evening before the dedication of the temple, 3,200 Idaho youth were delighted to present a cultural celebration for their prophet, President Thomas S. Monson, at the Twin Falls, Idaho County Fairgrounds on Filer on August 23, 2008. Entitled Living Water, the celebration opened with a flurry of blue and white ribbons that turned the fairgrounds in Filer, Idaho into a flowing river. Stephen Tuft, who produced the program with his wife Susan, opened by saying, "In Magic Valley, our physical lives depend upon mountain streams, irrigation wells, and the Snake River. Our spiritual lives depend upon the living water from the Savior. The history of the South Central Idaho was then told through music, voice, and dance, paying tribute to Native Americans, pioneers, European and Mexican immigrants, and even the Idaho potato." President Thomas S. Monson presided at the dedication services of the Twin Falls Idaho Temple on August 24, 2008, the 128th operating temple in the church. Let them feel of thy divine love and mercy, he asked in his dedicatory prayer. Following the final dedicatory session, President Monson spent many minutes greeting the smiling saints who lined the sidewalk from the temple entrance to his awaiting car. When he came upon Maria Eugenia Hernandez, he spoke to her in Spanish, even singing lines from a popular Spanish song with her. Maria was so deeply touched by the experience that for several minutes she could not speak because of her weeping and could not write because of her shaking hands. President Monson's love was returned during his drive to the airport, where families lined the roads holding signs that expressed such sentiments as these: "We love the Scriptures. We love the Prophet. We love the Temple." Once the Twin Falls Idaho Temple was made operational, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in southern Idaho began flocking to the temple to receive saving ordinances for themselves as well as for the dead. These efforts have been supervised by a wonderful series of temple presidents, their wives serving equally as faithfully as temple matrons. An entire generation of local Latter-day Saint youth has grown up making the sacrifice to be at the temple gates as early as 4 a.m. on Wednesday mornings to perform baptisms and confirmations for the dead. It is not uncommon to have several hundred youth visit the temple before their school day begins. In late 2017, Bishop Mark Lambert of the Twin Falls 15th Ward made a formal request for the temple to be opened early for the youth temple baptisms on Thursday mornings in addition to Wednesdays. President Young agreed to the request if the Twin Falls Idaho Stake would provide the adult volunteers on an ongoing basis. Since January of 2018, members of the Twin Falls Idaho Stake have staffed those early Thursday mornings, increasing the number of youth baptisms and confirmations dramatically. Our stake is committed to the ongoing support of this wonderful opportunity for service in the Lord's holy house. Weeks after the dedication of the temple, the Twin Falls Stake was split for the third time, this time resulting in the formation of the Twin Falls South Stake on September 15, 2008. Previously serving as the first counselor and stake presidency of the Twin Falls Stake, Reed J. Harris was called to be the first stake president of the Twin Falls South Stake. This new stake took with it the Twin Falls 3rd, 9th, and 17th wards from the Twin Falls Stake. Following the organization, the new composition of the Twin Falls Stake included the Twin Falls 1st, 5th, 7th, 11th, 13th, 15th, and College 1st wards, as well as the Blue Lakes YSA branch. The 11th and 15th wards had previously been part of the Kimberly Stake. On January 1, 2012, the Linwood Ward was created in the Twin Falls Stake, taking in members from the Twin Falls 1st, 5th, 7th, and 13th wards. Mitchell J. Moffitt was called to serve as the first bishop of the new ward. On July 1, 2013, Glenn Russell Curtis and Nancy Knorr Curtis of the Tremont and Utah South Stake were called to preside over the newly formed Idaho Twin Falls Mission, which included stakes in the Mountain Home, Wendell, Twin Falls, Burley, Rupert, Cary, and Salmon regions. The old Twin Falls Stake office area in the Maurice building was remodeled to house the mission offices of the new Idaho Twin Falls Mission. On July 1, 2016, the four missions of the state of Idaho, Boise, Nampa, Pocatello, and Twin Falls missions, underwent significant changes to their boundaries. As a result of the boundary changes, the Idaho Twin Falls Mission essentially dissolved when it was renamed the Idaho Falls Mission, and its headquarters were moved to Idaho Falls. The Boise Mission gave up its stakes in Eagle, Star, and Meridian to the Nampa Mission, while picking up stakes within the Twin Falls, Burley, and Rupert regions. Northeast regions near Salmon, Idaho were taken into the new Idaho Falls Mission, as well as the Rexburg and Idaho Falls regions of the Pocatello Mission. The Pocatello Mission was basically cut in half. On the 14th of February 2015, President Hansen and his counselors were released from the stake presidency. Bishop Mitchell J. Moffitt was released as bishop of the Linwood Ward and was sustained as president of the Twin Falls Idaho Stake, with Rustin M. Hatch and Donald W. Thompson as counselors. Elder James B. Martino and Blake R. Alder of the 70 presided over the conference. It wasn't until after they were set apart that they realized that each of the three members of the stake presidency had a set of twins. Equally important in the success of the presidency have been brothers Adam Hodges and Jim Stevenson, who served tirelessly as stake executive secretary and stake clerk, respectively. Explosive growth in membership and church activity in Twin Falls 11th and 15th wards prompted the creation of the Eastbrook Ward on May 1, 2016. L. Todd Ames was called to serve as the first bishop of this new ward, with Cal J. S. Nielsen and Larry S. Kleffer as counselors. At the time of its creation, a realignment of church buildings took place to accommodate many recently created wards in the various stakes of the Magic Valley. The Twin Falls Stake relinquished control of its church building on Hankins Road to accommodate wards within the Kimberley Stake and moved 2 family wards back to the old Stake Center on Marie Street, which had housed the Idaho Twin Falls Mission Headquarters and the Twin Falls YSA First Ward. A sacred and testimony building tradition in the Twin Falls Stake in recent years has been to organize and carry out a pioneer trek to Martin's Cove for the youth of the stake approximately every 4 years. In 2017, however, the decision was made to organize a unique trek experience for the youth in the South Hills. Trek directors Corey and Kelly Pilling prayerfully and tirelessly planned every detail and supervised the many committees required to carry out the event. The planners and the stake presidency felt inspired to encourage each new Trek family to meet and forge relationships months before the activity, and then to hold family councils when facing challenges during the trek. Some of the devotionals and activities along the trek route included a river crossing, a great and spacious rock where volunteers from the YSA ward tried to distract and tempt the faithful trekkers to join their party rather than continue on the trek, a woman's pull, a brother's carry, and a Martin's Cove devotional. Evening activities included a pioneer carnival, a special testimony meeting, and a square dance with a live band. A follow-up fireside with a slideshow and emotional testimony meeting helped to cement the experience into the memories and souls of all who participated. The Twin Falls Idaho Stake was further blessed when construction began on the announced Bishop Storehouse located at 1675 Mountain Drive in 2015. Previously, it had relied on the storehouse in Burley. The Twin Falls Bishop Storehouse was dedicated on August 27, 2016 by Bishop Dean M. Davies, first counselor in the presiding bishopric. During his remarks, Bishop Davies said, "We have one desire, to do good. We reach out to lift others because this is what disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ have done since the foundation of the world. To operate this vast structure of farms, canneries, storehouses, training facilities, counseling centers, and to offer worldwide assistance requires a massive commitment of funds, labor, and resources, but we rarely speak of the expense. We give because the Savior gave. We love others because God extends His love to us. We lift others because it is the foundational principle of our faith." He also spoke of another building not far from the new storehouse, the Twin Falls Idaho Temple. "These 2 edifices complement one another," he said. "If you want to understand who we are as a people and what we believe as members of the Church of Jesus Christ, look at these 2 temples. One of them is spiritual, the other temporal. These 2 magnificent edifices exemplify and symbolize a modern-day commitment to fulfilling the 2 great commandments." Several local religious and community leaders attended the dedication of the Twin Falls Idaho Bishop Storehouse and had the opportunity to tour the facility and discuss its mission directly with Bishop Dean M. Davies of the presiding bishopric. On July 7, 2019, the membership of the Twin Falls 22nd Branch, known locally as the Spanish Branch or Rama 22, unanimously sustained the proposed decision to leave the Twin Falls Idaho South Stake in order to join the Twin Falls Idaho Stake. After 21 July 2019, they will attend the church in the Maurice Street building and partner with the Linwood Ward for combined youth and primary classes and activities. Not unlike the early members of the Twin Falls Stake, the members of the Spanish Branch, Rama 22, are pioneers in their own right and will surely bless and strengthen our stake as we forge ahead into our second 100 years. We thank you for joining us in celebrating the history of our beloved 100-year-old Twin Falls Idaho Stake and its courageous and faithful early members. There's a popular phrase used in our community, getting the water to the end of the row. This phrase emphasizes the need to provide water to each individual plant in a field. The settlers of this area worked hard to make sure water flowed into this community to sustain life. Without their pioneering efforts, there would be no magic in the Magic Valley. Some of those early settlers were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and brought with them the living water or the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. Over the last 100 years, they and we have been working hard to share that gospel message and to make sure it gets to the end of the row. With those early faithful saints, we echo the words of the prophet Joseph Smith. Quote, "The standard of truth has been erected. No unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. The truth of God will go forth boldly, nobly, and independent till it has penetrated every continent, visited every clime, swept every country, and sounded in every ear, till the purposes of God shall be accomplished, and the great Jehovah shall say, the work is done. End of quote. May we enthusiastically accept that challenge and carry the living water to all in our choice portion of the Lord's vineyard. And may the light of the Savior's love shine in the good members of this stake and community for at least another 100 years.